What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, today's video we are going to be talking about Eternals, The Heretic #1 by Kieran Gillen, Edgar Salazar, and the late Ryan Bodenheim. And in this video, I'm going to be breaking down how Thanos just recently met with an Eternal so dangerous that he created a weapon capable of doing something that the MCU Thanos did, but without the need of an Infinity Gauntlet. We're going to talk about all this and more right now, but first, if you want to see more awesome videos like this one, hit that subscribe button. I post multiple videos throughout the week, plus live stream the Blerd Cave every Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. So hit that bell button, that way you don't miss anything. With that out of the way, let's talk about Eternals, The Heretic #1.
You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
The last time that we talked about the Eternals, Thanos had just recently become the Prime Eternal, and he has been taking full advantage of this newfound station. He is the leader of the Eternals. He can pretty much do almost whatever he wants in regards to the Eternals. He can lay down new directives, he can abolish old directives, he can change the way that the Eternals move going forward in the Marvel Comics universe. But that's not really why he wanted it. We talked about this in one of the previous issues. Thanos is trying to make himself a part of the machine so that he can be reborn, because this version of Thanos is not the Thanos that we're used to seeing. He is a broken titan at this point and is, for all intents and purposes, living a half-life. He's not at his full potential, and he wants to become a part of the machine so that he can be reborn and thus regain his full 100% potential. And while Druig has been helping Thanos during his bid as the Prime Eternal, Druig brings up an individual who I don't think we have actually seen in Marvel Comics, by my recollection, since What If #26 in 1981. This is a character who is a deep-cut Eternal by the name of Uranus. Uranus, as one might imagine, his name is derivative of the Greek mythological figure Uranus, who was the husband of Gaia, who was the personification of the earth in Greek mythology, just as Uranus was the personification of the sky. But this Uranus is nothing like the one of Greek mythology. This Uranus was an Eternal who is considered to be the first ever exiled Eternal. He was the first to be entered into the exclusion. For those of you who keep up with my videos on the X-Men, you will likely draw some comparisons between the Eternals' exclusion and Krakoa's pit. Though the main difference here is that in the pit on Krakoa, you are held in a stasis, you're not allowed to move, you're not really able to do anything, you're just kind of there stewing in your own thoughts and in a stasis. But in the exclusion, it's something different. You're actually able to move around, you're able to do and think and act and whatnot. It's just that you're locked away in a place that you can't leave. And as one might guess from Uranus's sunny disposition, he is a guy with whom the likes not to fuck. Even as he is being introduced to Thanos, and we ourselves being introduced to him, or rather reintroduced to him for the first time since 1981, Uranus is already coming with the smoke. Having not even known Thanos for 5 seconds, but already knows so much about him because he is still able to observe events going on out in the world. He knows about how Thanos had wiped out half of all life in the entire universe during the events of 1991's Infinity Gauntlet story arc. He knows about it, and he's unimpressed because while yes, he thinks, oh, this guy wiped out half of all entire life in the universe, I mean, yeah, that's actually a really cool feat. However, you only did half. Why do a half measure? Why not just go whole ass into it? That's kind of where Uranus is coming from in regards to Thanos. Now, for those who don't understand why Uranus has the disposition that he does towards Thanos as well as any other Eternals, it's because back in the day, Uranus actually tried to commit what some might consider universal genocide. You see, the Eternals' mission from the Celestials to basically wipe out excess deviations, one of their prime directives. But Uranus felt that, well, any deviation should be considered excess deviation. That means to get rid of all deviants in all of their different formats. It doesn't matter who or what they are, how deviated they are, how not deviated they are. A normal deviant is just as bad as an excess deviant. And for those that don't understand what I'm talking about, deviants are beings that are going through perpetual change. They're always mutating in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And eventually it gets to the point where they deviate to such an excessive level that they become outright monsters. Abominations that terrify even other deviants. We even see at a point in this comic where Uranus actually destroys an excessively deviated monster, saving other deviants from being killed by it. And just as they're thinking, oh wow, you saved our lives, gosh golly gee, thank you so much, and just before they can finish rendering their thanks to him, he immediately wipes them out as well. Uranus fell out with his fellow Eternals primarily when he decided to go against the grain, go against the Unimind and the leanings of his fellow Eternals, which in this case was the three patriarchs. He had upset the balance between the three patriarchs of which he was a part of, the three patriarchs being himself, Kronos, his brother, as well as Oceanus. He believed that any deviation was excess deviation, and it was just easier to wipe out all deviants, and even more so, not just all deviants, but all life in the universe that wasn't eternal. In a lot of ways, he kind of might remind you of villainous figures like Voldemort, who hated muggles, or you might be thinking about real life terrible people like Adolf Hitler. They kind of have some similarities here. Ethnic cleansing and ethnic genocide, special genocide, this is all what Uranus is about, to the point that he created a weapon that could do exactly the very thing that we've seen Thanos do in the MCU, albeit Uranus didn't have to spend 10 years collecting 6 Infinity Stones to accomplish this feat. He actually traveled to the underwater deviant city of Lemuria and unleashed a weapon that disintegrated everybody, recreating that dusting effect that we saw in Infinity War when Thanos had snapped his fingers and wiped out half of all life in the universe. This put him at odds with the rest of the Eternals, and that is how he became the first Eternal to be exiled to the Exclusion. If you are someone who does actually happen to be very well versed in Eternal lore, you might be sitting here thinking, wait a minute, what's up with Uranus? Because for one, he looks completely different than what he did when last time we saw him, and more importantly, wasn't he sent away? Like, wasn't he banished away to the planet Uranus, as was his namesake? What about the war? What about the civil war between Eternals, between both brothers, Kronos and Uranus, their forces of Eternals going to war against one another? Did that just not happen? No, all of it happened just as we saw in the pages of What If number 24 in 1981. However, this event where Uranus went to Lemuria and destroyed all those deviants, this is one of the moments that actually spurned that war into actually happening. Either way, Uranus is a dangerous person, and he has existed since time immemorial, as pretty much all Eternals have, but he is one of the originals. He is one of the first actual Eternals in existence, from which most other Eternals came from. And while he is the grand uncle of Thanos, because his father Elars was begotten from Kronos, and of course Kronos is the brother of Uranus, Thanos actually doesn't see him that way. He even refers to him as grandfather. Now, this is after Uranus has given Thanos a very powerful weapon, a weapon that comes in the form of an imprint key that would allow Thanos access to all of the weapons in the armories of Uranus, weapons that could unleash incredible and irreparable harm on the Earth, but more importantly, would allow him to destroy the machine that rebirths and fuels the Eternals and their powers. Uranus is an incredibly powerful being who has weapons at his disposal that could very likely be some of the most deadly and dangerous things in the universe. I mean, we gotta think about it. This was a guy who psionically fought off wave after wave after wave of Eternals when they put him in the Exclusion and tried to extract all information from his mind about the weapons that he possessed. The guy literally did this without fail for 100 years. And eventually he did wind up losing, but that's kind of how we wound up getting a Uranus who kind of vaguely looks like the MCU version of Thanos. This is how he actually came to look more like how Thanos looked in the MCU at the beginning of Avengers Endgame, with a half-burned face. Uranus is a very interesting character to me because he's one of those guys who only listens to the rules as written, and while in a lot of cases this is typically not a good thing, but it's just what he is prone to do. This is a guy who, once he has made up his mind about something, that is what he's going to stick with. Case in point, even when being told about how the Eternals recently learned the truth about what they were meant to do, that they were meant to cultivate the human species as antibodies against a celestial plague, he doesn't care about that. He says, no, I only care about the edicts and scriptures of the Celestials. They didn't code us this way. They didn't actually put this into our core programming. So as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter to me. I'm sticking to the plan as it originally was. Now, why would Uranus give Thanos access to these armories and tell him that it would help him destroy the machine? Truth of the matter is, I think Thanos wants to be reborn, and once he's reborn, he will probably get rid of the machine just because Thanos is so cocky, he doesn't think he'll ever be killed again. Or at least if he does, he'll just find another way to get around it. Though you would think he'd want to keep the machine around considering how much fun he's been having with it, constantly resurrecting his mother and father, Suisan and Alars, and repeatedly torturing and killing them over and over again. It's something that seems to have not gotten old to him. You'd think he'd want to keep something like that around. That said, this was a fail-safe weapon, something that Uranus kept in his mind and even used it as a weapon against his fellow Eternals, basically telling them that if they killed him, his fail-safe would kick in and his ultimate weapons would unleash themselves automatically. This is why he was put in the exclusion and not just killed outright. Uranus sees a lot of himself in Thanos, and while Thanos does refer to Uranus as his grandfather, that's not really, I don't think is actually really the case. He's technically still his grand uncle since Kronos was the father of Alars. But if he was actually his grandfather, it would make some sense considering how similar they appear, but also in how similar they seem to be to one another. Even Uranus has to point out that Thanos is probably the only person in the entire universe that is a part of the Eternals that he's not disappointed in. I can tell you right now, this is not going to be the last time that we're going to see Uranus, and considering that Judgment Day is coming up, the Avengers are already going to be having their war with the Eternals over the whole Avengers using one of their gods as their new condo deal. We also know that they're going to be going to war with the mutants, and the mutants are being seen as deviants, and something tells me this is probably where we're going to see Uranus creep up again. So if you're wondering, oh, wait a minute, are they going to just table this guy for forever? No, I don't think this is the last we've seen of Uranus. He's a character who hasn't shown up in a lot of comics. He's only been in like 2 or 3 to my knowledge, and we've actually heard his name more often than we've actually seen him, and that's going back over the course of decades. So I think we will actually see Uranus get out of the exclusion at some point. I do think that Thanos would be unwise to let him out, but something tells me that somehow maybe this failsafe that he has in mind will probably wind up getting him released. But anyways, let me know what you thought about Eternals, the Heretic #1. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.